everybody, welcome back. I'm Danielle and I'm a registered psychotherapist. In today's video, I want to talk to you a little bit about ways that you can tolerate your distress. In this video, I'm going to share with you 6 steps that we use in distress tolerance, which is a form of distraction that we use to be able to handle really intense emotions, really intense urges that we do have. So typically, I'm not usually a fan of using distraction as a form of coping. However, sometimes when we get the help that we need and we take the steps that we need, there comes days where we just all of a sudden have a huge amount of emotion, pent-up emotion. And sometimes we don't know how to handle it and we wonder to ourselves, what am I going to do to distract myself? How am I going to stop myself from engaging in something that could be more problematic for my life? And this is where I find distraction techniques such as distress tolerance to become helpful. They are helpful in the way that they can prevent something worse from happening, to prevent a situation from becoming more problematic. So for instance, if you're somebody who typically resorts to using coping mechanisms like binging or using some sort of self-destructive behavior that could be almost self-harming, you don't want to do those things. You want to find ways that are distracting in more helpful ways. So today I'm going to talk to you about some of these things that you can do to help yourself in these moments. So I'm going to be using what is called distress tolerance, and I'm going to be using an acronym called ACCEPTS to kind of teach you some of these skills. And it comes from Dialectical Behavior Therapy, which is kind of a third wave behavior therapy for cognitive behavior therapy. So I'm going to run through these skills together, and at the end I'm also going to include a link to where you can find the instructions to these skills to kind of help you along the way. So the first step is activities, which is the A in ACCEPTS. And what you want to do is be able to engage in an activity that is going to grab your attention in those moments, in those really heated moments, where you're going to possibly lash out or binge eat or something along those lines. Engage your attention in something else. So maybe engage in a puzzle, for instance, or exercise, or cook, or do some research. Do something that is stimulating enough for you that is going to grab your attention for a little while. And then you can go back to whatever you're doing when that emotion kind of subsides. The next thing is contributing, which is the first C in ACCEPTS. So contributing basically just means do something for somebody else. So you want to get your attention away from yourself and those really strong emotions. Do something for somebody else. That could mean volunteering. That could mean reaching out to a friend that you know is in need or a family member. But basically, you just want to get your mind off of you for a little while and spend time focusing on somebody else who may be in need. And this kind of leads you to the next step in ACCEPTS, which is comparing. So when you can compare to yourself, for instance, if you are a university student in your 3rd year of university and you're finding it extremely challenging and you feel like there's no way you're going to get out of it, compare yourself to maybe how you did in your 1st year. Your 1st year was probably really complicated, a lot of new stuff to get used to, and you probably felt like you couldn't cope. And maybe you coped in really negative ways, right? So you can compare yourself to your 1st year and think, oh my goodness, look how far I've come. I've been able to achieve those really difficult things as well and get through some really painful moments. And I'm sitting here today being able to manage that as well. So get yourself out of that by comparing how you were then with who you have become now. It can also be a form of achievement. The other thing you can do by comparing is kind of focusing on individuals that you know who may not have the same quality of life that you have, or are maybe less fortunate than you in some way. This is where volunteering can actually come in helpful, because sometimes you're working with people who are less fortunate and don't have the money or the resources to provide for themselves. And then you almost start shifting your perspective in your life by saying, wow, I do have things I'm thankful for. I do have things to be grateful for. And in this way, that can really help you to shift your perspective a little bit in that moment of distress. The E in accepts stands for emotion. So basically what you want to do, you want to find something that is opposite of the emotion that you have, or different than the emotion that you have in some way. So engage in an activity that you know is going to evoke different emotions. So for instance, if you're feeling sad one day and that overwhelming sadness just kind of takes over your whole being in that moment, put on a funny movie, right? Laugh at something, try to get your mind on something else, your emotions on something else, change that mood of yours, right? Or even listen to a funny podcast. You know, if you're angry and you really have an urge to lash out, maybe take a few minutes to relax. Go to another room, engage in a relaxation activity. One that I would recommend is called progressive muscle relaxation. This is where you tense and release your muscles. This is really helpful in anxiety and also with dealing with really intense emotions like anger. So I would recommend that. And I'll send you a link as well at the bottom so you can have more resources about that and have a little bit more clarity into what that is to see if it will be helpful for you. Another thing that you can do is if you're feeling unmotivated, you're just kind of feeling really dull and you just don't really know what to do, what about listening to really exciting music for yourself that's going to pump you up and get you going again? These are just some ways that you can kind of try to push your emotions away to a certain point, be able to evoke a different emotion or opposite emotion than what you're feeling. And then when you feel like you're back down, be able to engage in regular activities again. The P stands for pushing away. And this has to do with pushing away painful thoughts, which often accompany really challenging emotions. So you don't necessarily want to stop the thoughts altogether. We can't necessarily. We can't, change what's going to come into our mind and what isn't. But what you can do is try to create some distance. Try to separate yourself a little bit from these challenging thoughts that you're having. One of the ways you can do this is mentally put your thoughts in a box. Imagine yourself having a box and putting those thoughts aside in there. Another thing you can do, if you're more hands-on, is write down the thoughts that you're having and put them in a real box or a real envelope. The thing that you can do is tell your thoughts no or stop. Try to take some control back of what your mind is telling you by saying phrases like no and stop. Right? Your mind is going to feed you all sorts of things, all sorts of images, memories, and thoughts, but try to separate who you are from your thoughts by speaking back to them, so to speak. T stands for thoughts. So basically, you want to do something that is going to require a lot of mental effort to take over some of those thoughts, to be able to distract you a little bit in the moment from the thoughts that you're having. So this is sometimes where grounding can come in. So one thing that can be helpful is to be able to, count backwards from 100, for example, right? It requires a little bit of mental effort. You can make this step a little bit harder for yourself and more challenging by counting backwards by threes from 100, right? You basically want to do something that is going to create some mental effort for yourself, right? Another thing that might be helpful is to memorize song lyrics or even recite song lyrics that you already have in your mind. This is also mentally stimulating. Same with puzzles like crosswords or something like that. Anything that's going to engage your mind to distract you from what your mind is already telling you want to do, you want to try to focus on. S stands for sensations. Basically, you want to use physical sensations to shock you out of what intense emotion, urge, or thought that you're having. One of the common ways people do this, and you've probably seen it, is to wear an elastic band, and when you're noticing yourself have an intense urge or emotion, you snap that elastic band, and it gives you a little bit of a shock to remind you, okay, wait a second, snap out of it, so to speak. And another thing that might be helpful as well is to think of objects that you can hold that would give you some sort of a shock, right? One thing I like to do with clients sometimes is have them hold an ice cube in their hand for about 60 seconds. I like to challenge them to see how long they can go. A lot of people want to stop after, 20 seconds or something like that, but see how far you can go. Think of how much energy would require you to focus on being able to hold that ice cube. And that's essentially what you want to do. You want to distract yourself from what's really going on in your mind and what you're really feeling by focusing on something else. Some people like to take hot and cold showers and change the temperature drastically just so they can feel that sensation on their skin. It's a bit of a shock, right? Some other things that you might want to do is taste something bitter or sour, eat a Sour Patch Kid, or eat some kind of spicy food to kind of shock you out of what's kind of going on. So these are 6 tools that may be helpful for you going forward to help you when you're in need of a temporary fix or a temporary relief. It is not going to be a long-term fix at all, and it is not meant to replace anything that you're learning in therapy or elsewhere. It is helpful in the moment to provide you some temporary relief when you're suddenly on edge and you need something really quickly to help you. I strongly urge you to make a plan, because one of the biggest challenges is remembering or forgetting what to do in these moments. And that's sometimes why we go off and do something that is worse in that situation. So write it down. And you know what? When you do use these skills, you might find that it doesn't work right away. And that's okay. There's a whole bunch of skills and tools out there that you can use, right? So it's okay to change it up a little. Use it as an experiment to yourself. What is working and what isn't working? You can find a link in the description box of a handout with the distress tolerance skills and what they're about if you want some further information. I really do hope that you like this video, and if you do like this content, feel free to subscribe. If you have any other suggestions for what you would like to know more about, feel free to leave that in the comment box as well. Until next time, take good care.